When you want a Benjamin Moore color, don't try to match it with another brand's paint.
Hello and welcome to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. A reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and airing live on Sportsnet 360 Monday to Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. Make sure you find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and please rate and review our show. I'm your host, Wim Lou. And for the first segment, I'm joined by Howard Beck of Sports Illustrated. Howard, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing great. First off, the last time you were on, this was, I think, way back in April. That was part of the propaganda campaign. At that time, it was award season. And, we had you on in addition to a lot of other major U.S. reporters. And, we sort of spread the gospel of the good word of Scottie Barnes and Pascal Siakam. And then, I looked at the PDF, of the voting. And I think you did have Pascal on the third team, and you had Scottie Barnes for Rookie of the Year. So first off, Howard, just want to say thank you on behalf of the Raptor fans.
Just showing how truly wise and informed I am, I guess, right? Because I agreed with your audience, and so that's great. And then if I go on with a Cleveland-based show later today, which I think is actually on my schedule, unfortunately, they can just roast me for being an idiot for not voting for Evan Mobley. So that's always fun. I do remember our discussion, and I do remember I was still kind of mulling because ballots weren't due yet. But yeah, I guess that's where I came down. You've looked at that PDF more recently than I have.
Yeah, I gotta say, it does put a lot of pressure on the media at that specific point in the year. When sort of, I'm sure this program wasn't the only one to sort of do a little bit of campaigning, but you know what? Listen, that's the game, and we get into this for that reason. Let's start with Pascal. I want to talk about the Eastern Conference and sort of just how it's shaping out early on in the season here. And by early on, I mean like after 1 week. But Pascal, he finished the season really strong, and he started this season really strong. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, Howard. He's made a very bold proclamation at the start of the season that's probably going to be repeated over and over again. But he said at Media Day, I want to be top 5 this season. I mean, we can get to sort of that statement in a second, but just what have you made of Pascal's improvement, both at the end of last season, the way he finished strong to push the Raptors into the playoffs, and then also right now, the way he sort of started the year flirting with triple doubles and just overall looking really great?
I mean, obviously, really promising. I think what stands out right now are two things. There's an aggression that I don't think we always have seen from him. And I think that shows up to an extent in just the fact that he's on pace. And look, it's very early. So let's put a caveat and asterisks and qualifiers on everything because we're talking about a 4-game sample. But, 20.5 field goal attempts per game would be a significant career high. It's been averaging in the 17 range the last couple of years. His high before that, of course, was 18 and a half shots a game in 1920. And, that was just after he had broken out and just after Kawhi had left. And so he's been through a lot since then, as you guys know well. And so I think kind of regaining, whether it's physical health, confidence, everything, his feelings of security, maybe even with the franchise, given the occasional rumors of trades and things. He just seems to be very settled into his identity and his self-confidence. There's some shooting things that obviously, like his 3-point shooting's off by a little bit right now. But the other thing that stands out, aside from just obviously on a career high pace for attempts and scoring, is the playmaking, right? Like that's, I know you want to talk a little bit about his aspirations of being a top five player. I mean, I think one of the things you need to do in today's NBA to really be an all around player and to be talked about in those conversations, those tiers, is to be more than just a scorer and to be a creator for both yourself and your teammates to kind of lift everybody up around you. And you know, the high assist numbers, as you said, flirting with triple doubles, kind of speaks to an expanded sense of responsibility and role, I think. I think all that's encouraging.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think especially early in the season, you do worry a little bit about could there be like a little bit of statistical anomalies? Is it a hot start? All this other stuff. I mean, I think the encouraging thing for Raptor fans to know is that like from basically the end of last season, I thought he really took his game up to another level from March onward. Basically, he played 21 games the rest of the season from March. He averaged 26.5 points per game, 8.7 rebounds, 5.6 assists, shot 52% from the field, got to the free throw line 6 times a game. And those are basically his exact averages right now on the season. So it does feel like a bit of a continuation of the way he finished last year, but it's also, he's worked really hard in the offseason. And I think that more than anything else, that confidence and that self-assuredness that you're describing there, I think that's the impression you get from someone who has worked really, really hard in their game. And I think that for himself, he wants to set that goal for himself really high and get into essentially, maybe not top 5, but essentially like first team All-NBA kind of discussions. And Howard, I mean, as someone who has to decide on these things, and obviously this is months away, so we'll bug you later down the line as well. But can you maybe describe or even carve out a potential road path to how this would sort of be achieved? Because it is admittedly an extremely lofty aspiration.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's a couple different ways to talk about it. Because if we're talking about literally all NBA, then it's okay. Are you going to finish the season as one of the 2 best forwards in the league? Because the ballot is still structured as 2 forwards, 2 guards in the center, and so now you're having to beat out you know Giannis and Kevin Durant and I got to think of who else is. LeBron will be back in the discussion again, of course, if he stays healthy. Um, you know, there's going to be the usual logjam of players. If we're talking more broadly about like, I want to be a top 5 player in the NBA. I want to be talked about in MVP discussions, and that's kind of how we really rank top 5, right? Like the top 5 in any given season, not so much all NBA because that's by position. It's really the MVP voting. Well, look at who the MVPs have been and who ends up high on the ballot year in and year out. Those are always going to be players who, and almost always, there's some exceptions, almost always going to be one of the top scorers in the league, top 5, 10 at the least, probably. I haven't run the numbers to know exactly, but you're going to be one of the best scorers in the league.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be a guy who's viewed as a go-to player in crunch time, a guy who can put the team on his back and carry them at times of need, a quarter, a game, a week, a month, whatever. You are the clear go-to guy on your team. You're the guy that the team orbits around. If we're talking MVP discussion, definitely most of the time, some exceptions, you're going to be a 50+ win team. You're going to be a team that looks like it's got a plausible path to title contention. You're going to be a guy who's viewed as somebody who creates a lot of scoring for himself and for his teammates. Defense is a plus, but not always required. Steph Curry comes to mind in his back-to-back years as MVP, Steve Nash, Dirk Nowitzki.
Jokic.
But in general, like the things I just listed, those are the kind of the unspoken prerequisites to be the MVP discussion, and by extrapolation, the top 5, top 10 type player discussion. So the question becomes, can Pascal Siakam at age 28 make the kind of leap to be in that kind of conversation, to be that kind of player? And I was thinking about this before we came on, and like, it's pretty rare for a player to make a leap from star, which Pascal Siakam has been, to superstar, which is what we're talking about when we talk about MVPs and top 5 players. It's rare to make that leap at this age, although I mentioned Steve Nash a minute ago. Steve Nash did.
Right.
Nash was a guy who made like two all-star teams in Dallas, was viewed as a really good player, but not a superstar, not a future Hall of Famer necessarily, not a a go-to guy, not a guy who you build your entire universe around. And he also is the exception to the rule in the scoring part of it, of course. But then Nash goes to Phoenix, and we know everything else that happened there, and he wins, a couple of MVPs. So it's rare to make the leap at 28. I think. I haven't. No other examples came to mind immediately, but that's the leap that Siakam would be trying to make to get to that goal.
Yeah, and in Nash's case too, it was also like a stylistic revolution, and him at sort of the head of that as well. And I think even when you look back at it, those are two of the MVPs that I think players at that time really contend should have been theirs. I'm thinking about Shaq. I'm thinking about Kobe, obviously before he's passed. Like there's other guys who sort of like claim to a lot of those. But look, regardless, I think those are really great points. And I think the one thing that really stood out to me is just like that crunch time scoring. I think that more than anything else, like you know how this game works. It's like people can't watch every single game. It's just not possible, right? No. But if you come up with big moments that if I just say it, you just envision those in your mind immediately. Like DeMar DeRozan hits a game winner on New Year's Eve. And then the very next day on New Year's Day, DeMar DeRozan hits a game winner. Like those kind of plays, when they stick out in your mind so, obviously, when you come time to think about these things for voting, like, of course, those crunch time moments are going to matter the most. And I think, look, Pascal had a really nice baseline fadeaway against Miami, which, to kind of seal that game in the last minute, very impressive shot. Those are the kind of shots that he makes more often. They make the rounds more often, and it puts people more in awareness of what he's doing, because I think that, that is also the other part too. Is just you're going to need some campaigning. But listen, this is the show for campaigning. And I just wanted to know, essentially what it might look like down the line. We can come back to this conversation. Look, I think the rest of the East, right? So, Howard, I don't know how you had it tiered coming into the season, and I doubt that it has changed too much. But in terms of Eastern Conference tiers, I think the consensus was that Philly, Boston, and Milwaukee were sort of above the rest. First off, is that sort of how you had it? And I just wanted to get your thoughts on those three teams at the start of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was in the camp of like Milwaukee, Boston are in their own tier at the top.
Okay.
And then Philly is maybe the next tier by themselves. And then like they're like the Nets are floating somewhere in the top 2 to 3 tiers, because who the heck knows what the heck is going on with the Nets or what will go on or
can
whatever.
Ben Simmons stop fouling out all the time? Like,
holy moly. Yeah. Among other alarming aspects of his game so far.
Right, yeah.
So, and then, I had kind of downgraded Miami a little bit. Like if we're talking the teams that I expected to be, top 4, Milwaukee, Boston, Philly, and kind of Brooklyn with a fat asterisk. And then Miami 5th with the potential to break back in, because Miami constantly surprises us, right?
Yeah.
Looking a little shaky early now, but
they didn't look that great against the Raptors. 2 games. I mean, they split the series, but it wasn't like holy. We can't find a way to beat this team. It was like, you execute and you're okay. Yeah,
they've been trying to squeeze an elite. They've been trying to squeeze what is it? Blood from a stone is, I think, the phrase I'm looking for. They just don't have that kind of elite offensive talent that most of the top teams do, right? They don't have a Giannis, and they don't have a Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown combo. They just don't have a lot of offensive generators. And so they have to get by on just, great defense, timely scoring, efficient scoring, ball movement, beating the heck out of you sometimes, whatever. But I just don't feel like the Heat have the kind of offensive pop. And yet that's been their profile for the last couple of years, and they keep defying that and being a contender of some sort. But I feel like they're like that formula has some limits to it. And then they lost PJ Tucker, who, not a big offensive player for them, but clearly a floor spacer and a great defender and a key piece for them.
They look very small without PJ too.
What's that?
They look really small without PJ.
Yeah.
And it's not like PJ is some sort of like 7-footer who's like, controlling the paint or whatever, but there's just a level of physicality that really drops. Because, I've seen them very closely the last 2 games. It's just, like they really miss Caleb Martin, for example. And it's like, you shouldn't miss him that much because he got into a random scrap with a rookie. Anyway, we're not here to talk about that. But the Celtics, though, the Celtics look completely unfazed. I mean, I understand that like they got dropped by, I think, Chicago, but to me, when I'm watching them, they just look exactly like they were last year. The way they finished the year, they had some injuries. Obviously, Robert Williams is a big miss for them. Obviously, the Ime situation is still very confusing, and you know, obviously the coaching staff is very up in the air at the moment. But I mean, to me, the Celtics clearly look really, really good, just like they did last year. And you know, you're gonna have to go through Boston if you're gonna try to come out the East eventually.
Yes. The Celtics, it's interesting, right? So Ime Udoka gets suspended for the season. They install Joe Mazzulla, excuse me.
Yeah.
It's gonna take weeks before that comes to without having to think to for a minute. They
Yeah.
install Joe Mazzulla, who has no head coaching experience aside from a stint in Division Two, who's 34 years old, who most people hadn't heard of, fans hadn't heard of, and it's the natural thing is to think, well, some combination of having your third head coach in 3 years, the lack of experience by Missoula as he's installed, and just the cloud of having this strange, controversial, kind of troubling situation hanging over them. That's all has to coalesce into becoming some sort of ballast on the Celtics to start the season, and yet it hasn't at all. They've picked up exactly where they left off, or even better than where they left off, because where they left off was kind of misfiring in the finals, but against a great team. And it kind of makes the case in some weird way that, like, maybe the head coach isn't that important once you've established your chemistry. This coming a season after they made the case for why head coaches are really important, because Ime Udoka, I think, created a different set of expectations and accountability that they just couldn't get under Brad Stevens. As great as Brad Stevens was as a coach, they just needed a different voice and maybe that old school approach that Ime brought. Um, so it's just interesting from that standpoint, right? Like I debate this in just with myself all the time, year after year. Like, how much does coaching really matter? How many wins can a coach add or subtract based on how good they are with a team? And so that's, I don't know. I've just been playing with that thought for this early part of the season as well. But no, they look great. Tatum and Brown both look absolutely primed to do some damage. My colleague Chris Mannix wrote a story for our preview issue just about the idea that the Celtics really came out of the finals with this massive, chip on their shoulder, and a need to prove an urge to prove that the finals wasn't a fluke, and that they are capable of winning championships.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're right on pace. They just got to get a little healthier. Obviously, got to wait for Al Horford and see if he can hold up for an entire playoff run again. But I really don't see any doubts about that. And they've added some depth. As someone in Toronto, who generally Toronto does not like Boston sports teams. I don't know if the annoyance is sort of like two-way, but yeah, it's sad to see, unfortunately, from this perspective. But it's good for them at least. Philly is interesting to me. Philly is so they didn't start the season too well. They lost the first 3 games, including one against the Spurs, which I mean, you shouldn't really be losing to the Spurs at home. But I think the bigger subplot is sort of, can James Harden and Joel Embiid coexist to the point where they feel like more than the sum of their parts, or even just like equal to the sum of their parts? Sometimes when you watch the two of them together, you feel like they're less than the sum of their parts. Is that the impression you get from them as well, Howard?
Yeah, I mean, that is the story of the Sixers right now. They are less than the sum of their parts. This is one of those classic cases of, especially for Sixer fans, and I think for plenty of us in the media who expect more of the Sixers, where you try to pump the brakes and say, well, it's early yet. I'm not sure what's more troubling for them. Losing to two teams that they are supposed to be in the same echelon as to start the season in Boston and Milwaukee,
Right.
or then following it up with a loss to a team that's supposedly is tanking this year in the Spurs.
Mhm.
Um, the generous view would be, that this is still kind of a new group, that Harden got there middle of last season, had a couple months to try to get a sense of his role there, playing off of Embiid. He's never played off, with a teammate like Joel Embiid before. Their need to make sure that Tyrese Maxey, a burgeoning star, doesn't get lost in the shuffle between Harden and Embiid dominating the offense. They add PJ Tucker, they add Daniel House, they add D'Anthony Melton, overhauled the bench a little bit, trying to figure out roles all over again. That would be the generous view, right? They're
Mm.
early in a season where they've kind of reconstituted. But Harden came in, it's presumably or seemingly in great shape. Embiid came in apparently in not as great a shape because he had some plantar fasciitis issues in the offseason, and it messed up his offseason training. So maybe that's a little bit of an issue. But it just doesn't really seem like the Embiid Harden combination is producing the kind of better than the sum of their parts results that you would expect, right?
Mhm.
Like they should be a devastating pick and roll combo. They should be a devastating combo, period. And then you throw in Maxey and all of his offensive abilities, and they've got shooting, they've got defense. Like all the ingredients are there. You would check almost every box. So at the moment, I'm just going to chalk it up to early season doldrums or just feeling out period. But we'll check back in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, look, this team is very, very talented, and you know what? The Raptors are going to see them up close. We're going to see them twice in a row here, and we can sort of make further assessments whether they're going to be 3-3 after this, or if they're going to be 1-5. 1-5 will be very interesting to see. I think Philadelphia's fan base will take that well. I mean, I think that there's a bit of a question to me in terms of just like what kind of player thrives beside James Harden, and specifically what types of star players thrive beside James Harden, right? Because look, you could throw out the OKC thing because obviously he was coming off the bench, 6-man kind of thing. But in Houston, there wasn't ever a co-star that really like worked great with him, except for Chris Paul. And then, of course, that ended very poorly with him. And then I think last year when Harden first got here, it was like let's have him play point guard, and he wasn't scoring as much. And there's so much discussion of does he have the burst to score one-on-one anymore? And people were calling him washed. And I don't think he was washed. He had good moments in the playoffs, especially against the Raptors. But there were times where he really didn't perform. And then now you start to see the season, and he's really rolling, but it feels like Embiid really isn't. So I don't know. I guess there is a bit of a question in terms of just like what type of player, star player, thrives around James Harden, or if that's even possible based on the way he plays,
Yeah, right. Like he went through a lot of co-stars in Houston, from Dwight Howard to Chris Paul to Russell Westbrook, and and all of them ended badly. It always ended
Yeah.
with bad feelings and some desperate trades and some ill-fated trades and guys who oh, we're friends. This will work great because we're friends off the court. I don't know why you guys think that we can't share the ball. Well,
Yeah. Well,
didn't work so well, and
yeah.
friendships are kind of fungible in the NBA. So yeah, I mean, I think there's legitimate skepticism baked into that. And I thought there was something interesting that Harden said. We didn't hear him say it directly, but in the TNT broadcast last week, Chris Haynes, during one of the segments where he came on to talk about what his reporting of the day was around the team, and he said, I talked to James Harden this morning, and I'm going to paraphrase this because I don't have it in front of me, but Chris Haynes said that Harden said something to the effect of, and all these people are writing me off, and then I'm not still the same player that I was, and kind of like this idea of I'm going to show them I'm still that guy, and that actually caught my attention because I found it almost a little alarming,
Hmm.
in that if Harden's out to prove I'm still that guy, forget what you saw in Brooklyn before the trade, or forget what you saw last year in Philly, whatever. Well, then he looked that tells me that he might want to be the guy who's dominating the ball a lot and dominating the offense, and maybe to the detriment of Embiid or the rest of the team. Like I'm not sure that's the best thing. Like the best thing, if Harden can still play at that level in terms of just his abilities, his shot making, his acceleration and deceleration, and
Mhm.
keeping guys off balance, to create room for himself to shoot, his playmaking, all that. If that's what he's talking about, fine. But if it's more about like I'm going to put up numbers and show you all I can still be this triple double machine that Harden often was, or just obviously a ton of points, a lot of assists, then I wonder if that's too much of him thinking about how to prove I'm still this guy, as opposed to I prove I can win
Yeah.
at a high level.
Yeah.
So that struck me as potentially concerning.
Yeah, no doubt. I think especially at this point, what you want to hear is I'm here to win a championship. I want to do everything that the team wants me to do to contribute towards winning. I want to step up as a playmaker. I want to play defense, or at least be very committed to defense on that front to whatever degree that looks like. And of course, whatever the team needs to me in terms of the scoring and crunch time offense, I will be there to step up and take big shots. But I think, look, these are sort of storylines that we'll track throughout the year. Real quickly with the Lakers, man, Howard, this is. I mean, look, the Lakers are great because they're on national TV every single day, so everyone can look very, very clearly at how bad they are all the time.
Even all their shoot-arounds are on national TV, their practices are on national TV. When they go to lunch, that's on national TV. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's like, oh, they're in summer league, and Westbrook didn't sit courtside with LeBron or didn't acknowledge them. And I'm like, I have never cared even once in my life about who sits beside who in summer league. This is stuff that you should be doing in middle school, not professional NBA after 10 years with 2 MVPs. But yeah, I mean, look, this is I think look, Westbrook's gonna get a lot of the blame. To be honest, Westbrook kind of deserves a lot of the blame. He does play poorly. There was that game against Portland where he just decided, instead of eating up some clock, I'm just gonna shoot a long 2 here and miss it. And it's like, man, you're really opening the door for Portland to come back and win, which is exactly what happened there. And yeah, I mean, this is so bad. And I feel for Westbrook in particular, it's just like, this is like the worst drop off I've seen from an MVP level. Like the fall from grace and just sort of how disgraceful it's been at certain times. Like that has to be the worst that I can remember in my time following the NBA, which is about like 20 years or so. Howard, I'm going to lean on your experience. Have you seen another player who was as great as Westbrook fall to the dramatic degree that he has, as of right now?
Several come to mind, and they're all of a similar profile as a player, but not necessarily with his resume.
Okay.
Although some. Iverson is the first one.
Yes. Yeah.
Iverson eroded very quickly and could not accept a lesser role, a complimentary role, and because of that, his career ended much sooner than it needed to. And Westbrook seems to be very much on that track. Carmelo Anthony is a version of that. Steve Francis and Stephon Marbury, both different circumstances, and they were never at Westbrook's. Never at Westbrook's heights.
Yeah.
But ball dominant, basically scorers who played point guard, and they both eroded quickly. Marbury had all kinds of stuff. He was out of the league and went off to China because nobody in the NBA wanted to sign him anymore when he still had plenty of good years left. Francis just kind of eroded physically.
Right.
But yeah, Westbrook, I mean, it's pretty dramatic. It's pretty dramatic, and part of it is fit, and it's the wrong team at the wrong time. I'm not sure he's going to be a real great player anywhere anymore, but certainly a team that's built around him, he'd have a better shot than a team built around LeBron James and Anthony Davis. It was always an ill-fated, bad idea.
Yeah, so it's a horrible fit, and it's looking really sad for even just LeBron. I mean, like I think for every great player, like you just want to see them maximize, especially at the end of their careers, because obviously not everything's going to last forever. And if this is the way his career ends in this sort of Lakers situation, which has very little upside, it's really tough. But it's a big contrast to a book that you wrote, a Sports Illustrated commemorative book about the Lakers called "The Greatest Show on Earth: A History of the Los Angeles Lakers Winning Tradition." So I mean, I think the bubble period definitely fits into there, but outside of that, obviously the recent Lakers are sort of stand in stark contrast to that. So yeah, just Howard, just tell us about the book and sort of like, I don't know, when the Lakers are good.
Well, so the book is The Greatest Show on Earth. I did not write it, but I did write the foreword for it. It is a compilation of 15 pieces from the pages of Sports Illustrated from over the last 60 years or so, going back to the 60s. So these are stories about all the Laker icons, right? Elgin Baylor, Wilt Chamberlain, Jerry West, Magic, Kareem, Kobe, Shaq, LeBron, of course. And they're from the pages of SI, so it's by some of the greatest sports writers of all time, Frank DeFord and Chris Ballard, Lee Jenkins, Jack McCallum, Phil Taylor. So it's a phenomenal book. It is. That's the thing. Like the what I love about this book, and I was honored to be asked to write the foreword for it, but it's some of the best sports writing you can find because SI has traditionally had some of the greatest sports writers over the years. I think it's great for NBA fans. You don't have to be a Laker fan. You could just be a fan of great sports writing, but also, look, the Lakers are, one of the iconic franchises in all of professional sports, of course. And they've got such a rich history and there's such richly written profiles of their major figures in this book. Plus, obviously, SI known for great photography, so there's a
Mm.
bunch of incredible photos in there as well. I think the funny thing about it, just as a quick contrast to where they are right now, or also just germane to where they are, the Lakers have always been about stars, about superstars, and they'll get them one way or the other. And LeBron kind of restored that after they went through this fallow period after Kobe had retired, and then Anthony Davis comes along to join LeBron. And then, of course, they just kind of like overindulged, which is also a habit of the Lakers by going out
Yeah.
and getting Westbrook. Um, and so they've always just been defined by superstars, by some of the biggest names in the game, and that's even the case right now while they're going through what looks like potentially a disastrous season. But it's still about the stars, and it's also about drama because that's the other thing that the Lakers do bigger than anybody.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. Well, Howard, thank you so much for taking time. Appreciate it.
Al-
Go
Always a
pick up the
pleasure.
book. And yeah. All right. We're going to take a break right here. I'm your host, Willu. You've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Welcome back to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Wim Liu. For the second segment here, we'll be joined by Sportsnet's Michael Grange. Wrote an incredible feature on Scottie Barnes. Grange, are you on the line?
I am.
Grange, how you doing, man?
I'm good, Will. I'm good. Good to speak with you.
Yeah, likewise. Well, listen, this story up on sportsnet.ca. It's called Faster, Higher, Stronger, Happier. It's about Scottie Barnes. The website immediately told me it was going to be a 22-minute read. That's when I knew it was going to be a banger. And then I saw the lead, and man, this is a great lead. All right, this is the first sentence of the piece. The Toronto Raptors dressing room at Scotiabank Arena is a circle, though not exactly symmetrical. It bends towards the gravity of stars. So, Grange, let's start there. What do you mean by that? That's a hell of an intro, man.
Thank you. Well, it's kind of funny. I've been around this team for a long time, long enough to know the background of the Raptors dressing room story, and it goes way back to when Isaiah Thomas was running the team, and they were in the midst of designing Scotiabank Arena, and his big innovation was a circular dressing room, and it was, the idea was a good one. It was, everyone could see, everyone was equidistant in the middle. There was no room to kind of hide. Everyone could kind of look each other in the eye. And just sort of as time, and of course, Isaiah Thomas never got to see it in fruition. He took off when the going got tough, as we all know. But what was left behind was this circle, and just kind of by luck, really. It wasn't by any particular design. That's the right. If you go in the room on the right-hand side, it's at the north end of the building. That's traditionally where the team's biggest stars have been, and that's where Vince Carter was. That's where Chris Bosh was. That's where, people remember when Kyle and DeMar were doing their stand-up act. That's kind of where they were. Yeah. And of course, I hadn't been in that room for, it felt like, nearly 2 years. Right. And we're allowed back in as media and went in. And the first thing I noticed is, hey, Scottie Barnes is over on the where Vince used to be and Kyle used to be and Pascal Siakam is now. And I just thought it was kind of an interesting a very fitting little, not a very complicated symbol to figure out, but I thought it made sense for the piece.
Yeah, no, I think it makes sense. And I think it kind of sets the expectation, right, for where this could go with Scottie this season, in future seasons. But the idea is that, he is going to eventually join those type of players. Now, of course, there's a long way to go. I even remember, in the offseason, people kind of talk themselves into anything because there's just no basketball going on. And the discussions are how quickly can Scottie Barnes get as good as Pascal Siakam? And a lot of people were like, he can be that level next year. And I'm like, can we just slow down just a little bit? Pascal's really good. We're seeing it right now, but you should also see it because he's on the All-NBA team and stuff. It's you're not expecting Scottie to be there next season. I think that's too quick. And I think that the important part there is that a lot of work goes into sort of making these players get to that level. I think that's something your piece did really well here is just you talk to his trainer, and you talk to his trainer specifically about the ways in which you build up Scottie's skill set. So I'd love to sort of have you share some of the stories that Scottie's personal trainer shared to you in terms of how they're sort of going about making his game go to the next level.
Yeah, it was really interesting. And the fellow's name is Brian Macon. And he's a big figure in Scottie's life. So he's not just a guy he hires to put him through drills. This is someone who, when Scottie was just a young kid and kind of getting into the game, and he was living with another family for a little while, he would start to go to these basketball camps in the Boca Raton area. And with his older brother, and Brian had played a couple of years at Boston University, so a good D1 player. Mm-hmm. And he says, look, this guy is my mentor. He's like a father figure on the court, off the court. He's really someone who is essential in Scottie's story. And interestingly, and I think tellingly, as Scottie started blowing up, he was on, Team USA teams at age 15, 16 years old. He wasn't he was a known thing. Scottie never wavered. And so, I think that says a lot about Scottie Barnes because once a guy's profile gets up there, they can work out with anybody, right? People want that guy on their Instagram page, and anyway, and what was interesting talking to Brian was it was his phone that lit up. So after they got eliminated by the Sixers, and Scottie had that ankle injury. He takes about just a few days off after that, and hits up Brian and says, "Look, let's get to work." And they decided that we're going to work right through to the NBA Finals. So we're going to train full time as if we were going to go to Game 7 of the Finals. And in that period, they were doing 2 days. And what was interesting talking to Ryan was like how challenging, but also really fun it is to train a guy like Scottie, because it's like training a point guard, a power forward, and a center all at the same time. And and so they would kind of break their workouts down, and he'd come in the morning usually with a couple of guys from the area that he knew from high school that were playing college, and they would just do mostly guard type workouts, a lot of ball handling, all the kind of stuff you might expect. And then after that workout, that's when Scottie would go and get his post touches. And, the other guys, that wasn't a big part of their program. So Scottie would go and that's what we really see. And it was interesting. Actually, I talked to Kelly Olynyk for the piece too. He scrimmaged with Scottie in the summer. I couldn't believe how ambidextrous he was. And so it was just a lot of time making sure he's getting left-handed touches, getting right-handed touches, and all the footwork goes into that work. We've seen him as a pretty good post player, I would say. Yeah. And then, takes a break, goes back, relaxes, does whatever, and then comes back in the evening. And then they would take one kind of move or one sequence. Could be a mid-range thing, could be, working out of a pick and roll, could be whatever it might be. And just drill that and really kind of drill down on one or two kind of fundamental things. And then after that, they would, get into your shooting and catch and shoot threes and all that. And so they would just do that over and over again, just trying to check off a lot of boxes. Because like you said, it's a tough thing to do. Is it's not like, like Jalen Green, for example, in Houston, like that guy's played one brand of basketball his entire career, right?
And he's so good it works in the NBA.
Yeah, and whereas Scottie's really trying to kind of become like 4 different players. So I thought that was really interesting. And he said, like, at the end of that, he felt like Scottie had made a huge leap. And that's when, he goes to Vegas and we see those scrimmages from Scottie's YouTube channel, against Raptors first. And then they go to LA in August and you see him doing it against the top NBA guys. And that's where there was so much optimism, I think, from Scottie and from the Raptors about the summer he had, I guess, prior to that little ankle injury he had.
Yeah, no, first of all, you got to hand it to Scottie. Already a burgeoning career in media, just based on the content he's putting out there. I mean, a salute to the guys in the open gym, everything like that. But, even some of the own vlogs were really, really high quality.
And I talked to a kid named Max Gilbert who was the producer of those. And if you haven't seen them, I can't imagine there's many people on your show or listening to your show routinely who haven't gone and seen Scottie's Summer Diaries. But I really encourage you.
I'm sure everyone has seen it.
Yeah, like I was probably the last guy to watch it. But I mean, they're great, right? And I think you get a good feel for why Scottie's such a fun guy and a good guy. Mm-hmm. And and I said at the piece, I mean, it takes a certain personality to do play-by-play of their own highlights, and not come
He's
off
coming
as
for
an
every
act,
media job,
right?
man. My job, your job.
You know what I mean? Like
Devlin's job.
like he's doing it, but there's something about, and we can probably talk about this too. He's doing it in a way that everyone likes it. It's just funny because somehow he can be so good and be like putting guys on skates and basically chirping about it.
His own teammates.
Great. His own teammates, but it's not obnoxious. Like, it's just a really weird balance he's able to strike, and I think it really speaks to why he's such a unique figure for this team. I talked to Gary Trent about just that kind of stuff, and you say the name, and the eyes light up, the smile lights up. They start saying goofy things about him.
Right.
And it's just, Fred put it really well. He just says, look, these seasons are long and we're all kind of like, have to kind of look like we're depressed half the time. It's, Fred says, I don't know what kind of act that is, but Fred just gives everybody, Scottie just gives everyone a kind of a permission to be fun to make it, to make it what it should be is like the best job in the world, right? And I think that's another big aspect that comes through in the piece and talking to people around him too.
Yeah, and definitely you paint a good picture of like, especially because obviously he's so young right now, right? You have a lot of people sort of involved in the making of Scottie Barnes, right? You talk to his trainer, Brian. You talk to, his former coach, Leonard Hamilton at FSU. And at that part, I did not know this, but this is such an interesting approach. So you described here that essentially FSU gathers for these team talks, almost like a therapeutic session where
it is legitimately group therapy. Like it is run by a professional. Yeah.
Yeah. And for the players on the team, and they sort of get together and they talk about everything. And I thought, first off, that's a very innovative approach, very, just a very forward approach, quite honestly, especially today when you're dealing with this current generation. But how has that sort of approach helped Scottie in sort of his maturation as a player, both in terms of what he can do on the court, but also as a teammate and sort of the emotional maturation that you need to sort of be successful?
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting, and there's a couple of things there. And I was talking to Pat Williams from the Bulls about this, and first of all, like only certain people kind of go to Florida State, right? Because that's sort of what they're selling you on is like no one is bigger than the team. You're here to grow as a person.
Yeah.
They've had like Scottie, Pat Williams, and before that, Mfiondu Kabengele. I was with Boston now, the kid from Burlington. That's 3 first-round picks, 2 high lottery picks who never started a game or basically came off the bench for Florida State, right? And that is, think about that. Like, what other program is convincing guys who are at that quality to take on that role? And so, you know that going in. So Scottie's a certain mindset. He's willing to, he's willing to kind of buy into that a little bit. But once there's a real investment in trying to get people to be a little vulnerable with each other, honest with each other, happy for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a real tough balance in an environment where, guys, it's not all that different from the NBA. Maybe it's even a little more desperate because guys are really trying. Yeah, and you're really trying to show out. And so those therapy sessions, I mean, they're it's not like people are telling you everything that's going on in them, but they do sound pretty intense. Like at times they've been like, Pat Williams told me at one point they were like, he went to one that was like 6 hours.
Wow.
And, so there's a lot of like really getting to know the person, but also in terms of skills, it's they call them hot call outs. And it's, just getting to a point where you're comfortable calling out a teammate for something that's, needs to be better. And perhaps more importantly, but there's a way to do it, right? And, 20-year-old, alpha males, maybe they don't always know how to do it the right way, but there is a way to do it. You do it, first of all, from a place of love and respect. And with, you give a little, Scottie told me, you give a little sugar and then you give them a little bit of vitamins and they give them a little more, sugar at the end, right? And so that's one thing. But then the other is being able to receive that and have someone call you out and understand that it's not to be taken personally. It's because they have their best interest and the team's best interest. And so you take those kind of life skills you've maybe gained and, you fast forward into an NBA environment and, it stands out. And, Freddie was telling me about just seeing how he had to call out for Scottie more than once. And we saw Scottie, get pulled early in a few games. And, as great as that season was, it wasn't always perfect.
Yeah.
And, and that really facilitated growth. And I think that's why, that's a big reason why the Raptors drafted him. And I think it's a big reason why they're very optimistic about what his ceiling can be.
Yeah, no, it was great that you juxtaposed the experiences at FSU with sort of that, real life NBA experience that he had with Fred. And, that's Fred's role on the team, right? He's like the old head, even though he's like 27 or 28. It's very distressing how he's able to do that. But no, it sounds like honestly, Leonard Hamilton's got to be the head coach of the Brooklyn Nets. I feel like Leonard could do a great job with Brooklyn. But seriously, Grange, you did such a great job with this piece. Everyone should go read it. It's up on sportsnet.ca. Faster, higher, stronger, happier. Grange, I appreciate you. And congrats on the piece, man. It was just really well done.
Awesome. Thanks for I love doing it, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to chat about it. It was fun.
Anytime, Grange. Anytime.
All right.
All right. That was Michael Grange, Sportsnet.ca. Everyone knows Michael Grange. Come on. Yeah. And just honestly, like, I don't get tired of reading these pieces about Scottie Barnes because, you get obviously the behind the scenes, the basketball portions, the way you're training a player who obviously is multi-positional, as we discussed, but you also just get so many great quotes. And look, I understand that, like, these aren't people on the record aren't necessarily going to be like slamming a guy, but I think it's very clear that universally Scottie just gets great personal reviews. Like, you have quotes here that Granger's able to collect, from the guy Max, who's been working with him on the YouTube series, who sees him obviously behind the scenes because you're literally like, behind the scenes with the camera. He said, quote, he doesn't have this big ego. He doesn't treat people like they're below him or anything. People get nervous and then they come up to him, but he just treats them like a good human being. He's just this normal kid who's really good at basketball, And, you got Fred saying, quote, I told his mom she did a great job. He's a great kid. Like, that's, those are exactly the type of quotes that you hear about Scottie all the time. So once again, go read that piece. Lastly, before we go here, we're going to do Between the Lines, brought to you by Bet Rivers. It's a whole new game. Fortunately, Alex is not here, but he has already texted me about advice on how to bet Liverpool's match against Ajax coming up shortly here. I told him, don't bet Liverpool this year. That's actually a really not a good idea this year. But anyway, about basketball. So the Raptors are, underdogs, plus 1.5 tonight at home against Philly. This is going to be a little bit tricky because obviously these two teams know each other really well. They just played each other in the playoffs. I think, to me, the biggest thing is, okay, so Philly is not necessarily off to a great start. I know they got the win against, I think, Indiana. To be honest, if you're not beating Indiana, you're not a serious team. So they at least got that portion done. But I think, in these series against Philly, like, it depends really how the Raptors want to guard them, right? If they swarm Joel Embiid, which they're almost guaranteed to swarm Joel Embiid, and they double James Harden, then what you're probably going to see is a lot of three-point shooters go off. So you're probably going to see Tobias Harris score higher than the season average. You're going to see Tyrese Maxey. I mean, we saw what Tyrese Maxey did to the Raptors last year. I don't think the other additions in terms of Philly, like, we'll see if they impact the series all that much, whether you're looking at PJ Tucker or, Melton or some of these other guys. But, I mean, for the most part, I think the way the Raptors like to play is they try to force Philly's main guys to pass. And I think that can be really good when they really resist the pass. But I also think that they know how to play against this sort of style of defense. So ultimately, they were able to break down the Raptors' defense quite thoroughly in quite a few games, in the playoffs. So, I think I don't know if weirdly I'm leading Philly on this one, and I'm probably leading the over on 211.5 for the total for the game. But I'm a novice bettor, and if you take this advice and it goes well, just thank me, and if it doesn't, let me know so I can improve. So that was Between the Lines, brought to you by Bet Rivers. It's a whole new game. Alex, I know you're tuning in, so make sure you get all that down. And Alex has been doing these like 3 or 4 way parlays, and he's actually doing pretty well. So I think in the future segments, we should get Alex on more often just to sort of share what he's been doing, his advice of how to bet. But for now, that does it for us today. I've been your host, Wolu, and you've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure you find The Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and please rate and review our show. A reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and airing live on Sportsnet 360, Monday to Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. Thanks once again to Howard Beck of Sports Illustrated. Go get his the book that he wrote the forward on. Not the whole book that he wrote, by the way. I did misattribute that. My bad. Alex put it very clearly in the chart that he's writing the forward. And Michael Grange, who wrote a great piece up on Sportsnet.ca. Again, I can't recommend it enough. It does say 22-minute read, though, so it warns you right up at the top that it's going to be a really in-depth piece, but I think it's really rewarding if you want to learn more about Scottie Barnes. And, of course, thanks to our producer, Derek Brandale, Jennifer Rolnick, for helping us with the YouTube stream. And, I'll be back to talk to you more tomorrow.